Hello everyone, I'm going to talk about hypothesis testing in this video. First of all, I'm going to focus on the steps of the scientific research. Totally, there are 6 steps to reach the end of scientific research. The first one is started the issue. Issue can stem from observations and literature review. We already talked about the urban resilience and urban problems. We can consider the urban problems and urban resilience to find the research question. Also, research question can come from literature review. When we find the gap or unanswered question in the literature review which related to our challenge, when we reach a challenge in our daily life and we cannot find the clear solution in the literature review, we can develop a question. What can do? What is the source of issue? What is the solution? And these items can lead us to consider about the hypothesis. In the last step of the research, we need to design a research question and hypothesis. Hypothesis theoretically supported by the theory and also literature review. When we design the hypothesis, we need to design the methodology. How you are going to collect data? What is your strategy? After the collecting data, we need the testing the hypothesis. How this hypothesis supported by the data, and in this video I'm going to talk about the hypothesis testing. And after this step, we need to report our result as a research finding and conclusion. Generally, there are 2 types of hypothesis. Hypothesis is a type of statement that assumes the relationship between 2 variables, dependent variable and independent variable. This relationship can stated clearly in the hypothesis that is directed or indirected, or also positive or negative relationship. In the next level of designing hypothesis, we need to recognize the null hypothesis. Null hypothesis states no differences between or no effects between the variables. According to the saying, null hypothesis is similar to the defendant is innocent until proven guilty. Null hypothesis states no differences and no relationships, no effects between the variables. But in the alternative hypothesis, you can state that there are differences between the variables. And we are going to reject the null hypothesis. If the mean equals 0, the null hypothesis cannot be rejected unless it's rejected and our alternative hypothesis is supported by the data. We already talked about the z-statistic. Z-statistic indicates sample normal distribution. But under a certain conditions, we cannot reach the mean and standard deviation of the population. Under this condition, we need to test our hypothesis by the t-test. In the normal distribution, we can estimate the mean of population. But when our sample size is low, we cannot estimate the mean of population. Under this condition, we need to use a t-distribution. T-distribution has less sample size, particularly when our sample size is less than 30 cases, we need to apply t-test. And also our standard deviation and mean of population are unknown. In the t-test, we can apply 1 sample t-statistic or 2 sample t-statistic. In the 1 sample t-statistic, we draw a sample from the population without any grouping. But when we draw out based on the groups, particular two groups, we can apply two sample t statistic here. In the one sample t statistic, you can see the formula of the one sample t statistic here. The mean of sample size minus the estimated mean of population divided by standard error to square root of sample size. This formula leads us one sample t statistic. But the two sample t statistic can be reached by comparing the mean of two groups, group 1 and group 2. The differences between the mean of two groups to square root of square standard error of the group 1 to the sample size of group 2 plus square standard error of the group 2 to the sample size of group 2. Regarding this formula, we can estimate the t statistic, but the main differences between the one sample t statistic and two sample t statistic is the degrees of the freedom. Degrees of the freedom can be reached based on the sample size minus 1. In the two sample statistic, we can use the sample size minus 1 as a degrees of the freedom, but when we have a two group, we need to choose the less item of the degrees of the freedom. For example, when one group has 7 cases and other group has 9 cases, in the degrees of the freedom, in the two sample, we need to choose 7 degrees of the freedom. In the t distribution, we have a spread out situation in comparison with the sample normal distribution. Both t distribution and normal distribution are symmetric, but the difference here is the sample size. Sample size in the t distribution is low, less than 30, but in the normal distribution our sample size is high. When the sample size increases, our accuracy of the estimate and testing increases and error goes low. Both t distribution and normal distribution are single peaked and bell-shaped distribution, but the t distribution is more spread out. And also another differences between the t distribution and normal distribution is the tail of the t distribution. You can find the more probability in the tail of the t distribution and less in the center. And also when you increase the sample size, you can increase the confidence interval and reduce the variation respectively. Another topic in the t distribution is the one-sided and two-sided. When our hypothesis states the either positive or negative relationship between variables, our hypothesis is two-sided. But when it indicates only the negative or positive relationship between variables, it's one-sided. Two-sided t-test needs more sample size than the one-sided. When our sample size is low, we need to apply one-sided t-test instead of two-sided. Based on the formula, we can reach a critical value of the t statistic. To find the significance level of the t statistic, we need to use a table of confidence level. This table indicates some information, and you can find the confidence level here, which indicated as columns by percentage, and also the number of degrees of freedom. Based on the degrees of freedom, we can find the confidence level and critical value, and based on this information we can use the p-values to identify the significance relationship. When our p-value is less a certain amount, we can reject the null hypothesis, except that when our p-value is greater than the certain amount, we cannot reject the null hypothesis. You can use this table to find the confidence level and required p-value to reject the null hypothesis. Here I'm going to use an example to show you how you can apply t-test to the urban studies. During a period of time, some neighborhoods receive the federal grant, but the main question here is that is there differences based on the median household income in neighborhoods to be eligible to receive the federal grant? We designed this one as a research question and designed the null hypothesis that indicates that there is no differences between the neighborhoods, and in the alternative hypothesis indicates that there is a differences between neighborhoods to be eligible to receive the federal grant. To test this hypothesis, we need to back to our data in Excel. Here you can see the number of neighborhoods that received the federal grant. We coded as a 1, and then the neighborhoods that are not received the federal grant we coded as a 0. And also in the main variable here is the median household income. We are going to compare two groups to test our hypothesis. In the Excel we can use a t-test function. Okay, first we need to bring the group 1 and comma group 2, and the next item is one-sided or two-sided. Our research here is a one-sided, and also the next argument here is the sample based on the equal variance or unequal variance. I'm going to use the equal variance and then close parenthesis and enter. Okay, we need to bring the 5 item. Okay, our t-statistic here is 0.00012. Back to our table. The critical value for 95% of critical value indicates 2.262, and in the 99% is 3.250, and one-sided p-value for 95% of confidence level is 0.025, and for the 99% is 0.005. Our p-value is smaller than the 0.005, and we can conclude that our null hypothesis is rejected here, and our alternative hypothesis that indicates the differences between the groups that received the federal grant and the other group that did not receive the federal grant. And also we can conclude that the household median income plays a critical role to be eligible receiving the federal grant, and our null hypothesis is rejected here by using the t-test method of analysis. Thank you for watching this video.